was it, were you sharing or was Peyton sharing the screen for the slides?
Oh, I will share that. Let me stop responding to this thing. So I should, oops, let me drag this down there. So tell me when you can see something, Mike.
We can see it.
Yeah, I can
It's
see it.
in notes mode.
Is it
There you go.
Well, one of the younger staff here told me how to fix that. I won't take credit for that, being an old man. So that's why we have young people. So
Here is, and I'm going to bring my list up here. So, Mike, we'll go ahead and get started here. I just want to welcome everybody to the first of what will be two of. Oops, we just lost something.
oh, hang on a sec. There, it should be back now. Trying to arrange my screen so I can see the comments and all that, Mike. So, but I'm good now. I'll stop playing.
We'll fix all this in the post-production editing. We do have to load this on our Bang the Table site so that the rest of everyone can that can participate can watch it on that site. So again, welcome everyone to the first of what will be two of our meeting number meeting number fours of the steering committee for the Southeast Harris County Subregional Area. Today, if you could go to the next slide, we are going to do a bit of a roll call and introduction, just really quick, just to see exactly who's on the call here and willing to participate. There's going to be a bit of a review of safety and congestion conditions that you all should be a little familiar with from what we had presented at our third steering committee meeting. And then we'll get through the meat of today's discussion, which is the draft recommendations, which are divided into safety, capacity, and then area-wide big picture items that will address things like accessibility, transit, bike and pedestrian activities, and thoroughfare recommendations, which Kinley Horn will get into, and then we'll kind of wrap it up at the end of the presentation and go over some of our next steps, which will include individual meetings with each of the steering committee members and groups of the same interests. So that we can finalize some of these recommendations before we go out to larger groups, steering committees, public meetings, and share those recommendations. We want to make sure that this group right here, the steering committee, is okay with the recommendations that are being developed right now. And again, these are very draft. So next, Michael, we will go on a roll call. So did we lose? No, that was me. We will go through a bit of a roll call, so if you could just please let me know if you're present when I call your name. Bruce Mann. And I don't think he's on.
Good morning, I'm here. Thanks.
Oh, good morning, Michael. Just so everybody knows, I have two lists going here. One is this list that you're all looking at, the roster, but I also have those who accepted this morning meeting. I know the schedules are so busy that not everybody could attend one meeting, so we did drop this into two. So I just want to make sure that those who accepted this morning meeting could actually attend this morning meeting. Otherwise, we'll try to set up a special meeting afterwards. So thanks, Bruce, for your attendance. Brian Brown, I see that you're present.
Yes, I'm here. Lloyd will not be able to join.
Thank you for that. Chad Burke. Is Chad Burke on the call? I don't see him on the list here. Okay, so I'll mark him as not being able to make it. Donald Biaku, you're on the call, right?
Yes, present.
Good morning. And Jeffrey English from TxDOT.
Yep, I'm here.
Good morning. Catherine Parker from the Rail District.
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning. Ken Fickus, you're here, obviously, right?
Yes, I am. Good morning.
Good morning. And did Milton Rahman, was he able to make this call? If not, we'll say Jorge, you're here representing Precinct 2.
Yes, good morning, everyone. It doesn't look like Milton will make it, but I'll be here.
Thank you so much. I see Benny Bowles from LaPorte Police Department. Is Benny on the call? I don't see him on the invite list, but he did accept. Maybe they'll join later. I know Teresa Evans couldn't make this meeting, and I don't see her on the list here, so I'll mark her as not able to attend. Arthur Olivero from South Houston didn't get a response. Adam Ballesteros, you accepted, right? You're here on the call, right?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Thank you. And Sarah Benavides from Pasadena. Do I see her? I don't see her on the call-in list. I did see that she could make it, but I don't see her here, so mark her is not here. Lloyd won't be here. Sharon Moses Burnside. You're from City of Houston, right?
Yes, I'm here from the City of Houston, correct.
Good morning.
Hey, Mike, and just a quick minor update.
Sure.
Milton is now Deputy Chief of Staff. His title is the old one on the slide.
Deputy Chief of Staff. Thank you for that. Yeah, I knew that there was a bit of a staffing shuffle. For you guys, congratulations on all the promotions and all of this. We'll just make sure we update those to make sure.
Yeah.
I've got that mic for future presentations.
Great.
So thank y'all. And we'll go on to the next slide, Michael, since we got attendance here. Here's where we are in the study process. You know, like I said, this is our our fourth steering committee meeting. We will have another one tomorrow for those who couldn't attend this morning. We will follow this steering committee up with a subsequent steering committee meeting to verify a lot of the recommendations and get ready for our stakeholder meetings later this calendar year. And again, those outreach efforts are all to make sure that we have everything developed in an appropriate manner that you're all subscribed to when we build consensus through the steering committee meeting and our stakeholders before going later on early next calendar year in say February 22 for our public meeting to kind of show what the final recommendations are. So we will have some phase 2, what we're calling, of our outreach between now and the month of February before we wrap all this up in March, where we'll share the final plan with you all before wrapping up this whole effort. So thanks for going along in this journey. Again, this is the start of our phase 2 of our journey in the project development phase. So with that, I'll introduce our consulting team from Kimley Horn, Michael Feeney, who's going to take you through the rest of the presentation.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I'm Mike Feeney with Kimley Horn, and this is the exciting part of the study. So thanks for hanging on. We've had a number of meetings, but now we're starting to roll out some improvements, and we're going to go over some of those today. I'm going to have a couple of our teaming partners and my staff do it too, because so you don't get bored listening to just me talk. But just a real quick review. These were the priority corridors for mobility that we were charged with studying. Study area, Southeast Harris County. So this is what we were asked to look at. In terms of the intersections for mobility, these were the intersections we worked out with HGAC and the stakeholders to study. I think it ended up being 107 intersections. And the dots are just representation of vehicles per hour per lane at those intersections. So hotter colors like red have more traffic and hence congestion. And the green is, the mythological uncrowded intersection in Houston. And then the yellow is somewhere in between. In terms of safety, this is just a little review of the safety map here. Those numbers at the top right represent crashes per 100 million vehicle miles. And again, corridor in red or orange has a higher crash rate. The statewide crash rate, just for reference, for a 4-lane undivided facility is 325 crashes per 100 million vehicle miles. So we have a number of higher crash locations here, and that's the focus of some of our recommendations in this study. So there was over 6,000 crashes on the study corridors. The contributing factors, a lot of speeding, a lot of poor surface conditions, but then some poor illumination and distracted driving also contributed a noticeable amount. So there were some pedestrian and bicycle crashes in there. So this is what we got from the study area. And we actually looked at some Harris counties, done some Vision Zero work, as well as City of Houston. So thanks to those entities for allowing us to use their data. So these are the priority intersections we're looking at for data. The KA is a crash with a fatality or an injury. And
Michael, can I
again,
just interject just really quick here? Looks like Bruce Mann has a question on the last slide.
sure.
Bruce?
Yeah, sorry. Just really quick on the motor vehicle accidents. Did you guys break down commercial vehicles and POVs?
Peyton, do we have access to that data?
No, we didn't break that down. I suppose we could. We got for the Chris data, we got just the crash records. We'd have to pull the unit records and look at what type was included. But we can do that. That's a good
catch, Bruce. So we will do that, and I'll shoot you an email, and we'll include it in the next presentation.
Thank you.
So again, here's the crashes, and KA again is a fatality or injury crash. So the darker the red and the purple or dark color are some of the highest crash locations in here. So we focus some of our efforts on those locations. Well, all these locations, but those we gave some special attention to. So now we're going to talk about some draft recommendations, and we'll go through it. And some of these we're just going to give samples on, and you'll see later. Mike Burns and I will come out and meet with you over the next couple of weeks to say, for example, go talk to Deer Park. I'm not going to bore everyone with going through 107 intersections here. We wouldn't have time. But we'll sit down with Deer Park, LaPorte, the county, et cetera, city, and talk to them about their study areas and show you in great detail what we're proposing in terms of mobility and safety improvements. But some of this stuff, we just want to give you a sample of it, and then the quarter-wide stuff we will go through in some detail today. So as far as vehicular safety, we've got a mitigation toolbox. We can do some lane modifications, driveway configurations, channelization to improve operations and visibility at the locations. And again, here on the bottom right, looking at sight distances to remove some obstructions and have safer operations at the intersection. And then illumination also for nighttime operations, and better signage for both daytime and nighttime. So these are some lower cost safety fixes that we can do. And the pavement condition is going to be a recommendation kind of broadly out of this, but also making sure the striping is done properly and with the current materials so that the driver's path is clearly marked for them. And it should improve the driver awareness, the driver vision, and where we can, we're going to reduce conflict points to reduce the potential for a crash. So just an example, over here, Shaver Street by Crenshaw Road. One of the things we really noticed real quick is the striping's out, it's faded. You can refresh the striping and get some improvements with that. Longer term, we can put in some LED street lighting, add a southbound left turn lane, and reconstruct a signal with LED lighting. So we're kind of looking at short-term wins and then longer-term things that either might require more funding, or you want to do in a coordinated fashion, so you have to take time to develop a plan, or might require right-of-way. And we know that's a longer process. And we'll go over these kind of improvements with you in some great detail when we do these individual meetings here in the next few weeks. But this is it. And then we will, when we start writing the report, or we're writing it now, associate cost savings with these crash reductions that come out. Another example here, Fairmont Parkway near Shaver Street. Short term, some better school zone signage, adding pedestrian countdown signals and ADA ramps, refreshing the striping. That should improve safety there. And longer term, we're talking about some dedicated left turn lanes, some consolidation of driveways to reduce conflict points, and potentially some two-way left turn lanes in certain sections. So these are the types of improvements we're looking at the intersections to provide better safety. And some of that will spill over into better operations as well. Just a couple examples of capacity recommendations of the 107 intersections. So this is your distribution of level of service. And if you're not a level of service, if you're not a traffic engineer, level of service is a way to represent how well the intersection or piece of a transportation system is functioning. It's like your grades in school, A through F, except they add the E in there. So for urban operations, you like to have things not functioning worse than level of service D in general. E and F are your 5 o'clock in the afternoon type operations here, rush hour, a lot of delays. slow speeds. A and B are very free flowing. So this is the distribution of the 100 plus intersections that we have. And as you can see, on the left is 2021 PM peak hour. On the right is 2045, the study year for this. As you go out in time with the growth in the area, you're getting a lot more congested and overcapacity intersections. So this is without any improvements there. So the capacity mitigation toolbox, one of the things that's come out in traffic engineering land lately is the introduction of flashing yellow arrows. Most agencies have adopted them. So we've got quite a few proposed in the area where it makes sense, we think, and we will sit down and review them with your staff when we do these upcoming meetings. So that's the yellow ones are proposed, and then the green ones are already existing in the study area, and then the dark black circles are areas where it's just not appropriate. But we have gone through this with our subconsultant Gradient quite a bit, and this should help improve capacity at the intersections dealing with left turns. Just to give you some more physical examples, Spencer Highway at Center Street, short term, we're looking at extending some left turn lanes so those vehicles can be processed during each cycle and not spill back into the through lanes. Longer term, we're moving the concrete median and extending the southbound storage again, so you have a longer left turn lane so vehicles are not spilling back into the through lanes, making that approach work very poorly. And then adding some dedicated right turn lanes. And if it's requiring right of way, we're generally calling it a longer term improvement because you have to condemn the right of way or negotiate with that business owner, do any mitigation if it affects their property. So these are some examples at the intersections out here that would, by 2045, allow the intersection to better handle the growth, and perhaps better than it does now. Another example here of Spencer Highway at Allen Genoa. The flashing yellow arrows will help operations here. Eastbound right turn lane will allow those vehicles to get out of the intersection, operate more efficiently. Long term, we're looking at adding through lanes. So that's a little pavement widening. So again, that's a longer term planning thing that each entity will have to address. But this will provide you with acceptable level of service operations in the future. In the PM here, what this is representing, the short term, less expensive, less right-of-way required type of improvements will get rid of any intersection operating at level service F, almost eliminate E, and dramatically reduce the ones operating at D. So you will be over 3/4 in the A through C range, which is very good operations in an area like Houston. So, and these are not overly expensive set of improvements we've proposed intersections. Go out to 2045, the set of improvements we're proposing, including 24 years of traffic growth and population growth, it will dramatically reduce the number of intersections. On the left is if we don't do anything, on the right is with the recommendations. It'll dramatically reduce the intersections that are failing operating at level service E and F. You have a lot more in C, so this is a pretty good set of improvements here. And now we're going to go on to some area-wide recommendations. And again, these type of specific intersection improvements, we're going to meet with each set of steering committee, Deer Park, the county, LaPorte, Pasadena, et cetera, and go over these in detail in your area so you can really chime in on them and have some of your technical people. We just don't have the time today to do it, to go into traffic engineering wonderland. But now we're going to talk about some area-wide recommendations. These are a little bigger picture, but I think they'll benefit everyone in the study area. And I'm going to introduce Reddy. If you want to introduce yourself, Reddy's with HDR, who's one of our sub-consultants here. I've partnered up with HDR a lot, so there's a good relationship between the firms, and they do some very good work.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate the introduction. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Glad to be here. I'm Reddy Delakanti with HDR. I'm a traffic engineer. I've been working with Mike on these projects for HJC for a while now. And for our focus on this project was mostly on the corridor-wide improvements. For example, we were looking at the entire corridor. We looked at about 25 corridors to see what kind of improvements can we come up with which are applicable to the entire corridor. And first and foremost, I'd like to talk about access management. These pictures are showing you what we mean by access management. We have identified some commercial corridors where there's a lot of multiple driveways, which are closely spaced, which also attract a lot of turning movements. And these turning movements cause a lot of conflict points within the corridor, and thus causing a lot of safety issues. So what you see on the left here is basically a corridor which has a continuous curb cut where vehicles can make turn from anywhere. Whereas on the right side, you see that the curb cut is reduced to a focus point where the vehicles can go from only one point instead of turning from anywhere. So basically what that does is reduce the number of safety issues. Like if you want to go to the next slide. So we came up with these red lines, what you see on the map here are those commercial corridors where we see a lot of driveways, where we see a lot of conflicts. So we think there is a potential for access improvements here, where you could consolidate the number of driveways, reduce the number of conflict points, and thus coming up with some safety benefits. And we looked at crash data closely to come and also land use and also right of way to see if these corridors can can be potential can use potential improvements in terms of access management. The next slide, we're going to show you a few pictures of improvements that we came up. We're recommending for different corridors within the study area. On the left side, you see two-way left turn lanes, for example. Those are helpful when you have a lot of turning movements, both inside from the side streets and also from the driveways. Those two-way left turn lanes act as a storage. They provide an opportunity for vehicles to make a two-stage left turn, and that basically helps take out those left turn slow vehicles out of the through traffic, and thus avoiding the rear end crashes. And on the right side, you see grass median, which is raised median. Those are definitely useful when you have a lot of pedestrian activity. When you have a wide cross section that the pedestrians have to cross, those provide a refuge, so the pedestrians can make that crossing movement in two stages. We also have a road diet. So we identified some corridors within the study area which don't have a lot of traffic volume. They have surplus capacity where we think those are good candidates for adding either bike lane or definitely adding side paths, sidewalks, things like that. So we could, basically what you see on the left side again is a 4-lane cross section which has 4 lanes of active traffic, which is reduced to 2 lanes of active traffic on the right side. What this does is, pedestrians don't interact with as much traffic, and there is, again, like I said, there's surplus capacity, so reducing the 4-lane cross section to 2-lane doesn't really impact the operations that much. With all these improvements in mind, we went through each corridor, and then we came up with this map. What you see in the magenta or the pink lines are where we are recommending the 2-way left turn lanes, and that amounts to about 13 miles of corridors. And raised median, we came up with all the orange lines where we are proposing raised medians. That comes to about 25 miles. And roadway diet, those are the surplus capacity corridors. It's kind of hard to see them. There's a few here, 4 miles of corridors, 13th Street, Park Place Boulevard, and West Vista Road right in the middle of the map. Those are potential corridors for road diets. And reconstructing raised median, that's a unique one. Center Street, I'm sure you're all familiar with that one. That has a raised median. Unfortunately, it's not to standards, and that one has storage lanes for left turn vehicles, but that's conflicts with the space which vehicles use to make turns. So it's kind of it's all in there. So we need to improve that raised median and provide an opportunity for vehicles to store and also make those turns without conflicting with other vehicles. So to come up with these improvements, we looked at the crash data. Same thing, we looked at turning traffic, the amount of right of way we have available, number of driveways on each of these corridors, and the land uses. Next, we looked at lighting improvements. We looked at each corridor to see where there is adequate lighting, where we could add more lighting. And most of the lighting is not LED, but that's again LED lighting is obviously much cheaper and also efficient. But we came up with about 44 miles of corridors. That's about 1/3 of the corridors we are looking at, which have inadequate lighting. Next, we looked at signal improvements. There are two types of signals that we are considering for this project. One is mid-block crossings, where you have a crosswalk across the street, mostly near schools, where we could use potentially a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, which is the picture that you see on the left side there, or a high intensity activated crosswalk, a hawk signal. Depending on the speed of the roadway, number of pedestrians crossing, number of lanes they have to cross, we come up with one of these two improvements. But these are improvements we are recommending for mid-block crosswalks. And then we looked at intersections, and what you see on the left side here, this is a signalized intersection within our study area, but it's missing pedestrian equipment such as push buttons or pedestrian signal heads. So we identified a lot of those intersections where you need pedestrian equipment. And on the right side, there are pedestrian equipment at these intersections, but these intersections have issues with the mast arms or the poles, either they're dented or they're cracks or rusted, things like that. And also some of the signal heads, they're missing visors, they're not aligned with the middle of the lane. So there are issues like that. So this, I go back to, yeah. So this slide is basically highlighting all those intersections. There are 16 intersections which need mid-block crossings, for example, signals, or I see there's a question. I can give a pause and then answer the question.
Yeah, Adam, feel free to go ahead and jump in.
Okay, I think those are that was some great information as far as the lighting conditions. I was just wondering, so a couple of questions. How do you determine what, I guess, if additional lighting conditions are needed? Because I seem to notice that, but it's how do you quantify that? And then also, I always notice the sign reflectivity at night, and so several signs here in Deer Park, I've asked, they just don't appear to be reflective at night, and so I've asked some of my engineering interns to go clean off the sign and see what it does, and it's not dirt on the sign or smog or anything. It just lacks that reflectivity. So was that also something that was studied in there? Because there's times when you can barely see the sign, just maybe 30 feet in front of you, and it's a speed limit sign.
Adam, that's going to be a global recommendation. It would be a lot. We'd have spent a ton of budget going out counting every sign in there. I can't even calculate how many are there, but that'll be a recommendation to make sure that all the signage meets the standards for retroreflectivity. And there are standards out there, and we will provide a reference to those to make sure that just what you said, that people can do it, whether it's for guidance or information or it's a regulatory sign, that it meets the standard.
Yeah, that'd be excellent. Also, if there's a way that maybe just privately you could share that with me, so maybe we could put in our capital improvement project, because I said there's quite a few that I'm kind of worried about at times, and so we'd certainly like to get those replaced. And if there's a way that we can have that implemented in some of those areas to your standard that you'll be coming through with, we'll already be ahead of the game.
Yeah, we'll do that and share it with you. We'll be coming out. You're one of the people on the list we'll go over later to come out and talk to. So
I'll give you somebody else to talk to, but
okay.
I'll definitely be here to help. Appreciate it, guys.
Okay. All right, and then we'll send Peyton out with some Windex for the signs. But no, but you're absolutely right. Some of those signs do get faded, and it can definitely help with efficiency and most probably safety even more.
Thank you, guys.
No problem. Yeah, thanks, Adam. So yeah, like I was pointing, this slide is basically showing all those orange points which need pedestrian equipment, and there's a lot of signals which need pedestrian equipment, almost 41 of them. And there are 16 signals which need other equipment upgrades, and 16 mid-block crossings which could use either a hawk signal or a RRFB. So that's for the signal improvements. Mike, you want to go? Yeah. So then we looked at the intersections for curb ramp improvements. Curb ramps are either missing on one corner or all four corners. There's about 470 intersections overall within the study corridors we looked at. And those are yellow points that you look at on, it's kind of hard to see them on the map, but those yellow points are highlighted, highlighting those intersections which need some kind of curb ramp improvements. And what we did is we looked at the schools, and what you see, the the blue circles around the blue circles are basically a buffer of about quarter mile around each school within the study area. This is just to highlight, how many schools, how many intersections are falling within a walking distance from the schools and which are missing curb ramps. So there's about 174 of those which are missing curb ramps and that are so close to the school. So maybe that's a good point to start, start putting them in. So this picture here is basically showing, what we are talking about when we say curb ramps. You need, those are good, those are ADA compliant, accessible. These provide the accessibility for wheelchair, population in wheelchairs. The next slide, so we looked at the sidewalks. I mean, luckily there is plenty of corridors which have good sidewalks. Sometimes there are either issues like damaged sidewalks or cracked sidewalks. Sometimes they're obstructed with poles and other items on the sidewalk, and also covered with grass in some cases. So we call these we are basically identifying them as those sidewalks required for maintenance, and there's about 7 miles of them. And there's, like I said, there's 132 miles of sidewalks within this study area, which is pretty good. Some of them are substandard, but they're still, nevertheless, they exist. And we are identifying some sidewalks which are missing, and there's about 20 miles of them that you see in red color here. So that's where we need sidewalks. And what you see in blue is the ones that are requiring maintenance. Again, we laid out the schools on this map here and a walking buffer around them to identify, which corridors need more focus, which are right next to the schools. So that's for sidewalks. Then we looked at the transit and the bus stops closely, and a lot of bus stops are missing shelters, and there are more bus stops on the west side of the corridor and the west side of the study area, and also the east side. So we looked at those bus stops closely to see how many of them are missing shelters. And almost 2/3 of them are missing shelters. Actually, I'm sorry, 84% of them are missing shelters. So there's very few bus stops which have shelters. And on the east side, same thing. A lot of those red dots that you see, these are all missing shelters. So pretty much on the east side, there's no bus stops with a shelter. Then we also looked at the lighting at the bus stops. Same thing. Lighting is definitely, it's better than shelters. I think there's more lighting than shelters. So you have about 57% of the bus stops which have lighting, and 43% of them are missing lighting. So those are definitely improvements that we can start with. With that, Mike, let me hand it back to you so you can talk about other transit improvements.
Thanks, Reddy. And that's a lot of information. And Mike Burns will be sending you the presentation, and you can look at these maps in a little closer detail. We know it was bigger scale, but it's a big study area, and we're excited to get some of these improvements out there. And now we're going to look at transit a little bit. I'm going to have Josie Ortiz, a planner with Kimley Horn, a very talented one. She's going to go through a few more active transportation topics.
Hey, everybody. Good afternoon. So the first step was to look at transit. We actually contacted the Harris County Transit Authority, and recently they did a study that compiled ridership data, and they did a large public outreach initiative to understand kind of where people wanted to go in the area using transit. And as Reddy showed you, there's kind of bus stops on the west side and bus stops on the east side, and there was sort of this missing middle. And so Harris County's study kind of filled in those gaps with some proposed routes and stops. So that's what you see in the dark or the solid red lines in the middle. And then just as an overview, we were looking at where can we make additional connections that make sense. And along Spencer Highway, there was either proposed or existing along the entire study area along Spencer Highway, except for that missing part on the west side. So we just proposed another connection down Spencer to connect to that park and ride that's just east of I-45, just to provide that more regional connection as well. And one thing to note is feasibility study is recommended for future study to kind of fill out exactly what those routes and stops look like. And before I go into the kind of that bike ped recommendations, just wanted to cover what a shared use path is, as we're recommending quite a few of them in the study. It's typically around 10 foot in width, and it's separated from motor vehicle traffic. It allows for, given the name, it allows for many different uses to access it. Basically anything with wheels or legs can go on the shared use path. And it does provide connectivity to other bicycle and pedestrian facilities. You don't really want to propose one that dead ends somewhere. You really want to provide that, the overall connectivity throughout the study area. Although with the shared use path, because it is separated from motor vehicle traffic and sometimes is off roadway, it doesn't always provide direct connectivity to destinations.
Yeah, and our charge, we're looking at more the spines of a bike shared use path network. I mean, the individual cities and the county would have to do the little fingers out into neighborhoods, but this would provide a network to build off of.
So kind of our first step was to take previously recommended active mode facilities within the study area. There have been several studies done, including there was a Healthy Parks plan, the Livable Centers study. Deer Park has been doing their own active mode recommendations. So we wanted to take all of those and make sure that we incorporated as many of them as we could in this recommendation. So that's what you see there, and those highlighted blue lines are previously recommended active mode facilities. And then we took what's existing on the ground, and that's what you see in the dark blue, and then there's one dark red line along Galveston there on the west side. That there's about 91 miles of existing facilities within the study area. And then the next step was to kind of connect those gaps. So this is where we propose a lot of the shared use paths. The reason for that is because they are high comfort. It allows for many different types of people to, one, be safe while using them, and to feel comfortable while using them. And there's about 244 miles of those proposed facilities throughout the study area. You can see that a lot of them overlap with the previously recommended studies, but there are some additional ones, typically along bayous or utility corridors, that we've recommended to kind of, again, close those gaps.
Yeah, and this would provide some true options for people to make some non-vehicular trips, because it's an extensive network. It's what a lot of people in the public are wanting these days. So it's definitely eliminating some gaps, as Josie said.
I think we've got a question there, Mike.
Oh, okay.
Hey, this is Jorge. I just wanted to say this is great. This is a really great analysis. As you guys may know, we are also working on our own precinct-wide Parks and Trails master plan, and so I'm excited to coordinate in the future so that we sort of mesh our efforts together. But out of that effort, I gotta say that we did have a survey with almost 1,000 responses, and the top request for Parks and Trails obviously was more active transportation infrastructure, right? Part of it was, another request was cleaner restrooms, but really the top 3 or 4 were like better trails inside the parks and connecting through parks and connecting through destinations. So this is a really great effort.
Well, thank you. And we come out and talk to the county, and if you're going to slide in Milton's stead, yeah, we'd like to A/B them and see where they overlap and which, what makes sense to include from your plan. I can't help you with the clean bathrooms, but we can help you with the shared use pass. So,
Mike, I think you talked about going out with Windex earlier.
That was paid. Yep. And the more you build these things, the more you see people riding. And I started riding when I came to Houston in 2001 again, and just maybe it's more center city, but as the bayou stuff has been built, you're seeing more and more people out there. Everything from hardcore riders to just people taking their little kid for a walk. So it's good to see.
Definitely.
All right, so moving on, we also took a look at some thoroughfare recommendations. We didn't find an overarching thoroughfare plan for this area, obviously because it's split up between several different municipalities. We did incorporate the city of Houston where it exists on kind of that west side. But going from there, we wanted to look at kind of that typical thoroughfare grid. You're looking for about a mile in between corridors for the largers and the larger classifications. And then as you get down to the minor, you're looking at that quarter to half mile connectivity. So we did a deeper dive, kind of looked at some areas that maybe we could propose some things. So what you're seeing on the screen now with all the solid lines is where the classifications have right-of-way that directly correspond with what we've recommended. So the status you can see in the legend, sufficient width means no additional right-of-way is required for that classification. Expand right-of-way means a little bit of right-of-way widening would be needed. That doesn't always necessarily mean a roadway widening, but right-of-way widening. And then new proposed right-of-way is where there's no existing right-of-way currently. So the dashed lines you can see there, that's again where we're proposing some expanded right-of-way to kind of help with the connectivity. And then the new proposed roadways in the dots. I know this is a lot to take in, and you're probably looking for those roads that are in your municipalities. But again, we can do a deeper dive in this with those follow-up meetings.
Yeah, but there's some great work by Josie and Andy over here. And as Josie said, it's a lot to digest, but we wanted to just get it out there. And when we have these, excuse me, these sit-down meetings that Mike Burns is going to set up shortly, we can dive into them in great detail. And these are suggestions. You may wiggle it here or there, but there's a couple gaps that would be nice to connect. And it may not be the first time it's been proposed, but now you'll have an approved study that'll back you up on it. So,
and we do have a couple examples here that Mike will pull up. So that blue box, this is a proposed
over here.
This is a proposed right-of-way widening. Again, we wanted to bring these examples to you because some of them may be a bit controversial, may take a little bit of discussion to kind of hammer out the details. But again, this is to kind of help that connectivity.
This is Sharon Moses. I have a question from the city of Houston.
Sure.
Looking at your major thoroughfare color coding and just wondering how you came to the decision of your colors. And I say this probably a little bit selfishly because for the city, when I look at this map, a major thoroughfare for us would be red. A major collector would be a dark blue. And so I know that there are other areas to consider, but if you're talking about trying to make sure that it connects and makes the network follow through, maybe we could reconsider the coloring just to make sure that it kind of aligns with what the city of Houston's maps are so that when we see it, we know exactly kind of how it aligns with our major thoroughfares and et cetera.
Absolutely.
No problem.
The coloring on this is strictly from HJC brand guidelines. So it's really flexible. And in looking at the major thoroughfare plan with the city of Houston, the way we did our classifications was strictly from TxDOT's existing classifications. But when I was looking at the city of Houston, the right-of-way widths that are required for city of Houston's major thoroughfare actually aligns with both the principal arterial and the minor arterial for this plan. So there may be some discussions that need to happen to kind of hammer out those details.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. This is another proposed connection. You can see those existing streets coming from the north and the south are offset there at that intersection. This is just a general proposed connection of those two roadways to make it more of a streamlined connectivity. Same thing here, going from west to east. That is an existing neighborhood with an existing street there on the west side. And then on the east side, I believe that is a Harris County flood control district. So again, these are very long-term recommendations. Thoroughfare recommendations are typically 30 to 50 years out. And so just a discussion that would need to happen.
Thanks, Josie. So I know this is a lot, and then we will have some time for questions. But the next steps, we're going to start scheduling meetings with you individually. Like I said, the municipalities, Deer Park, Houston and Metro, LaPorte, Pasadena, the county, the port, any others we are needed or requested. And we can go into some of these things in detail. I know, like, we only showed a couple samples of intersection safety or intersection capacity improvements. We can go through in great detail all those within your jurisdiction or that you have an interest in. And we can also print out some of these maps on a bigger scale, like the thoroughfare plan things or some of HDR's work on the sidewalks or whatever, and we can go through and mark those up with you and your staff. I would encourage you when we have these meetings to get some of your technical staff involved, because they tend to know they get the calls for the headaches from the public. But I think this will be critical to go into more detail. There was no way to present it today without having a seminar as opposed to a meeting, and then your eyes kind of get tired after 107 intersections too. And so at these meetings, we'd look at safety and operations focus, the intersections, the corridor, the active transportation, any other big picture improvements that you may come to mind. And then things like Jorge said, hey, let's A/B the shared use path plans and see what you said versus what we said. Sure, we'd like to dovetail to the extent possible with anything that any of you have been working on. There's still some more public outreach to do. We're going to have a couple more meetings with you, obviously. We're going to have the formal stakeholders meetings again. Those worked pretty well last time. We have another public meeting in here. I think we'll use the engagement tools again. Those seemed to work pretty well last time. People coming in and putting their dots and their comments, and some people attach pictures to those on there with the engage.com site using Bang the Table software. We can do surveys. We can pull out a lot of information from the public. That went smoother than I thought last time. So kudos to HGAC for setting up this Bang the Table platform and their engage.com website, because I think it'll let more people go. They're like, hey, I only have to go pay attention for an hour or two as opposed to 3 hours or 4 hours and drive there and back. So a couple things behind the scenes that are going on. HGAC's modeling team is using a software to take a look at provided some study area wide and quarter level statistics, but some of these improvements with the made changes in travel time with less congestion, the trip paths may change. So HGAC's talented modelers, Megan and Chris, will take a look at that. It'll implicitly model transit. And we have some rail and freight analysis are in progress right now. So Bruce, that may be of interest to you, but that'll be something we're coming up with shortly, and we'll reach out to you about. So I know this was a lot today, but we're really into the meat, the fun part. So thank you all for providing all the input. I mean, I think we've gotten good input across the board. So we're on schedule. Mike, did you want to, well, I guess I'll go to the schedule we showed earlier. We have some more public outreach, some more steering committee meetings. So the next steps, we're going to set these follow-up meetings as the next big set. We're going to incorporate HGAC's modeling results. We may revise some of our draft improvements because of that. We've got the additional things like freight and some rail crossings we have to present to you next time. The steering committee is always going to get a chance to review it. We'll go to the stakeholders, the public. Steering committee reviews it. Once we get some draft final improvements, we're really going to start working on the report. And the draft report obviously will be circulated for everyone to have a chance to have their input on it. And that's the path. We're really in the meat of it. The fun part when we're rolling out improvements and everyone can see them. And then kudos to everyone too. I think we're still on schedule. And since we started this during the height of the pandemic and everyone was learning their way, thank you for all that. So Mike, did you have any closing remarks before we go to, or Allie, before we go to any questions?
No, I think the balance of this time is used to get feedback, and I see Bruce Mann has his hand up. So Bruce, feel free to jump in with a question or a comment about the presentation.
Yeah, so I'm going to have some broader comments, I suppose. So there was a lot here, obviously. The first things I've kind of think of is, okay, fine, what's ballpark price tag for all of this? Because, there's a lot there. A relative ranking of priorities of some of this stuff. You touched on this, freight's not so much in here, and this is the breadbasket of freight for the region. So that's a huge, huge, huge component. And then the last comment is kind of bigger picture, and I'm gonna have to run after this. I have a 10 o'clock TechStop meeting, but is the timing. I'm a little concerned about the timing because I'm not even sure how far down the road yet TechStop is with the 225 study, and these were really supposed to be parallel. And I think it's important that these two studies work together because 225 is a huge corridor. This obviously ties into it. And I would want to not put a final bow on this thing until we really get that 225 study done by TxDOT to make sure that there's alignment between these two studies. So those are the comments I had.
Well, Bruce, I know you have to run, but real quick, once we get a little more comfort from the steering committee on these improvements, we are going to get price tags to them. We are going to have a ranking of priorities. We may give a general suggestions on which to do first or which buckets to do first. Some of them will be decided by, the cities. And then we will get back with you on freight because you are correct. It is a big influence out here.
And just one last thing now that I think about it, I used to drive every day down Cavalcade and 45, and there's a bike lane there, and it's not maintained. No one uses it. I think, we need to be careful about bike lanes and where we put them in and when we put them in, and making sure that we're surveying users or potential users to make sure that we're putting assets in the right place because, I drive around Houston and I just see bike lanes all over the place that just aren't being used. They aren't being maintained and, they're not free to put in. So
I agree with you 100%, Bruce, as a bike rider. And I know exactly the Cavalcade one. I won't ride in it because it's about 2 feet wide, or at least last time I was up there. That's why we're focusing more on shared use paths. They are much better used. They're much better, easier to maintain. We don't have a lot of on-street stuff for that reason because the maintenance is a cost that sometimes people putting these things in forget. But I hear you loud and clear on the bike lanes in the street.
Okay, thanks. You guys have a good one. Thanks so much.
And Bruce, I'll just note that we do have Roger Gonzalez, who's on the State Highway 225 PEL, participating in this call too. So we intend to continue the coordination with that as well. I don't know if Roger, you have anything that you want to add to the discussion here with how the two studies mesh, but.
Well, we have been coordinating with you, Mike, on the project, and I think we've had a meeting with Mike Finley also, and. After this presentation, I was actually going to send you an email to see if we could set up a meeting and maybe have a little workshop to discuss some of your findings and how we can incorporate them into the 225 study.
That sounds like a great idea, Roger, because I was going to suggest the same thing. Let's catch up. It's been a minute since we spoke, and now we have some concrete and asphalt and technological meat to chew on. And I'd like to see where you guys are at too.
I'd also like to note that the city did improve the bike lane on Cavalcade. So now it's a buffered bike lane. It looks real nice. Recent, very recent.
I would like to just add that we have been meeting with stakeholders. We've met with all the cities in the area. We met with the precinct and with Bruce and some of his staff also. So we've done some of the stakeholder outreach. We're kind of wrapping that up We had our last one last week with the Harris County Transit, and we're looking to have a public meeting coming up soon. And from that, that will wrap up phase one and come up with the need and purpose for the corridor. And then we'll start on phase two, which is looking at improvements and the alternatives for the corridor. So it's kind of a overview of where we're at on the 225 Pell study.
Yeah, let's get together with Mike Burns and compare notes so far, Roger, and we'll see where we're at. And I'm interested to hear what the port and the precinct had to say in terms of your stakeholder meetings.
Yeah, and I think that you guys are doing exactly what I want, which is, and especially when TxDOT gets to phase two on that study, I think that's important to tie these two studies together in that phase two work. So thank you. I got to run. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you.
And I'll just let everybody know that we'll probably send out a Doodle survey to just have everybody check out their availability like we've been doing all along here, and we'll try to consolidate those to what's most convenient with everybody. If there's some overlap that we can take advantage of, maybe we'll do that. But again, try to keep it topic oriented. We don't really need to invite LaPorte to some other areas that are outside of their interest area, so we will try to respect that. We're going to keep it individual. Adam Ballesteros, and I do see that Pasadena is on the call as well. Sarah Benavides. Sarah, I got you on kind of late. I'll change my attendance here, but was there anything from your city that caught your eye here that you want to ask about before we have our individual meetings? Not to put you on the spot, but I'm putting you on the spot. If she's not there, then Adam, was there anything to follow up on that really caught your eye? And we had some, was it 13th Street road diet that was being recommended, some flashing yellow signals that weren't necessarily existing in the Deer Park area on our maps. Anything you want to offer now before we have our individual meetings?
I guess a couple things. So the Public Works Director, Bill Peterson, he's been working with TxDOT on the other side of the meeting. And so I can't remember, I think the gentleman's name might have been Bill that was speaking before about kind of just to make sure that we have that cohesive interaction there with them. I know that in addition to that, everything that's on everybody's mind in addition to traffic and everything else is flood control. And so I know that Bill, when he's been talking to them on TxDOT, they have some restrictions that there's some restrictions on the flow of water across 225. So I think that's probably something more that they'll talk about in their scope. But just anything that's done like that in our jurisdiction, we would certainly like there to be either some improvement, or if it's going to be the equivalent impervious surface that's going to be placed, just to, hey, while you're there, you might think about upsizing the drainage or something to that effect. And so I don't know whether the city would have cost participation or flood control or precinct 2 or us or something like that. But just one more thing to look at. If something's going to be improved on the road, we might as well put some pipe in the ground and do some improvements while we're there. That's just a little bit of thought, not to complicate things, but just know that's another thing we're thinking about here.
Sure. No, that makes sense. And I think, Mike, we're looking to kind of handle things like that, flood control, resiliency, and those kind of things.
It's bigger picture. We're not doing a drainage study here, but we have some ideas on a few things where there might be some opportunities. And we have a fantastic regional drainage guy here in our office. And once we get a little finer tuned with these things, he's going to take a look and give us some suggestions on some drainage improvements.
All right, excellent. Thank you. That's probably the only other input I have. Thank you. Great job, guys.
So Bill Peterson with your Department of Public Works, Adam, is that somebody we would want to make sure is
correct? He's the Public Works Director here. Also Brent Koslow, he's the Assistant Public Works Director. We're working on some joint projects with Precinct 2 Harris County Flood Control District, and then also we just passed some bond funding for street improvements and drainage improvements. So like I said, there's some funding sources here and some things that we could that we're looking to do here in the next 3 years that are capital improvements. And so like I said, if there's some way we can assist with what we're doing, I just want to make sure that we coordinate that with you guys so that we're not putting new pavement where you guys anticipate removing it or vice versa. So
yeah, well, let's go over all that when we come out for our individual meeting with y'all, and invite your public works folks, and we'll all we'll all get on the same page.
Sounds good. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'll just start picking on people. Brian Brown, did any questions at all from the county's perspective at all?
Just one quick one. Maybe I missed it at the beginning, but what's the time frames of these one-on-one meetings that Kimley's going to do?
No, that's very good. We're trying to do all this the first couple of weeks of October. Hopefully have all this kind of finalized by October 15th. So the Doodle Survey that I'll send out will check your availability between next week and October 15th. And we'll just try to, have as many of these individual coordination efforts as we can before that date. Again, the idea is to build consensus among this group without, painstakingly go through location by location. So
Sure.
that'll be the effort, and then we'll follow up again with a group discussion about any of those concerns, like basically do another one of these presentations again before we go to individual stakeholder groups that we met with, like schools and chambers of commerce, those stakeholder groups. And once we get buy-in there or address their concerns, or maybe there's no concerns at all, go to the public and then do the big reveal. Again, show the costs. Bruce raised a very good point. Show the costs that we anticipate, a magnitude of cost type of thing, planning level, and then prioritize these things with how they align with our goals that we established early on in the effort. So going down the list here. Anybody from HGAC have any questions? Chris Van Slyke, did you see anything that you want to comment on?
No, I'm good. As you know, I have staff now working on the network recommendations on all of the sub-area studies. So I assume, Kimley, you will transmit your recommendations ASAP?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. Megan, do you have anything to say?
I'm good. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, and some last folks here. We did Catherine Parker. We didn't touch too much on the rail crossings, but I know that's something that we are doing analysis on for. Mike, do you want to talk to the rail issues, or Catherine, do you have anything you want to comment on with about what you saw?
No, I'll wait to hear what you all have. And go from there.
We are looking at them. There's a couple spots that are interesting. So
yes,
we're trying to make them less interesting.
Oh.
So
some passive crossings. I'm sure they are interesting. All right, yeah. Thank you.
And then City of Houston, Donald and Sharon, it probably seems like a good idea to maybe bring in a Metro representative to maybe an individual call. Does that sound like a good idea to talk about the bus stops and thoroughfare recommendations?
Yeah, Mike, and I think in our case too, it will be good to pull in traffic folks as well as stormwater planning folks. So I think when you are ready to send a doodle, let me know, and then I can give you some other emails to include, because it'll be good to have them at the table as well.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
I'm not. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So, so you're thinking you're gonna have our meeting together with Metro, or is it gonna be separate? Can you?
That's the question. It seems like a good idea to have a joint meeting.
Okay.
If you think that we got to do them separately, let us know. But I think it's a good idea to have your roadway folks, since public transportation kind of touches that area. Perhaps we can do that. But
we can do it together. Yeah, as one team. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, and having your traffic crew in there would be a good idea too.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we see what your availability is, I'll probably lean on you a little bit to kind of help out with that, and invite any others that we don't think of during this kind of scheduling exercise.
Yeah, sure.
For the invite to anybody that you think you might have missed. I mean, that's probably a good approach, is to kind of lean on you for that. Anyone else here? I don't see Laporte at all, Benny Bowles or Teresa. No other hands are raised. So
Jeff English had a question about the State Highway 3 Access Management Study for South Houston. Did we get a copy of that, Peyton?
Sorry, say that again, Mike.
Jeffrey English with TxDOT had a question. He said, did you guys ever get a copy of the State Highway 3 Access Management Study for that corridor in nearby South Houston? Did we get a copy of that? And was that a TxDOT study or HGAC study?
It was a TxDOT one.
No, I don't think I have a copy, Jeff. If you could send me a link to it, we'd love to look at it.
Okay.
Thank you for that. And if there's no other questions, Michael, we're an hour and almost 15 minutes here. I'll just let everybody know. Thank you for showing the contact information there. This recorded meeting will be posted on the engage.h-gac.com website, so that we're very transparent with the public to see what we're presenting and sharing with everyone. You can always email me or Ali Isbell at HGAC with any questions. But like I said, we're gonna send out presentation slides right after this call. And as well as a Doodle Survey to check your availability and try to schedule those meetings over the next 3 weeks. So.
And thanks. I'd like to thank everyone on the steering committee for your patience in getting to this point. You know, this is what everyone's been waiting for, but we had to do all the the due diligence and data gathering. So we're at the interesting part now, but thank you for helping us to get there.
Jeffrey, just on State Highway 3, we have the schematics from Ritchie Street to 518. I think I just downloaded that off TxDOT's website, but if there's a study that goes along with them, we don't have that.
Yeah, there's a PDF. I'll have to get it to you. Hopefully it's not too large. I'll like send it over email.
Great, that'd be helpful. Thanks.
All right. With that said, thank you all again, Mike Feeney and your team. Thanks for all your help in putting together the presentation and listen to the comments from our staff, and thank our staff for all the help that they've provided. And again, thanks finally to the steering committee members. And again, we'll do this again tomorrow afternoon. Same bat time. Well, it's not going to be the same time or anything like that, but give the opportunity if you want to go through this again. Tomorrow afternoon is that opportunity. So we'll talk to you all at that time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.